So for folks here, we like to say you're already in the education exploration phase. We find that the bottom line timeline, 6 to 12 months, is largely driven by the pace of education and discussion by the owner and the employees. That tends to be the driving throttle on the consultant work as well as any professional work. Education exploration is usually happening while the day-to-day business is also taking place. So it's not kind of a linear process, and very often owners will engage in a spurt of learning and discussion for themselves, with their employees or workers, and take some time to digest it. And there may be some other fits and starts in that process. We'll often get involved with owners early in the process, give a bunch of information, kind of sketch out what things could look like, and we might not hear from folks for a few months until they've talked to dozens of people and read a lot of material and then come back and said, this is what we think we want. We also see that the timeline for employee or worker education can have a different timeline than the selling owner, and so we have to accommodate for both of those. And very often these processes, at least the first two, are happening kind of in tandem, concurrently. Feasibility analysis is important to determine whether it's even worthwhile or possible to become employee-owned. Is there sufficient alignment of values? Is there enough interest by the workers to buy or assume ownership roles? That's going to be important before spending any time or money having a CPA look at the books or a lawyer to start drafting documents. And we'll often work with or at least advise clients to spend time with folks like Diane and John at the Northwest Co-op Development Center doing feasibility analysis and education training with workers. The structuring part, from structure to close, is actually fairly quick. When the owners and workers have their ducks in a row or have a pretty clear common idea of what's going to happen, we can come in and make very quick work of the drafting, filing, and that's rarely a time impediment or a significant cost impediment. These are just some examples. Our range tends to be on the low end from about $5,000 in legal, and more complex or delayed or adversarial deals will tend to run up to about $20,000. And that pales in comparison to a more traditional merger and acquisition scenario. Those can become easily hundreds of thousands. ESOP transactions, I will say, tend to be in the $50,000 to $150,000 range. And then ongoing maintenance for an ESOP is quite expensive as well. So this range would generally include, this timeline and cost would include forming an employee-owned structure and drafting the conversion documents. And like I say, most will take 6 to 12 months. We just completed about a $2 million transaction in 6 months. I've seen some of these stretch out to 2 years. We're working on one now that's probably going to be closer to 3-4 months.
So some tips for when you're in the exploration and education timeline. You take a look at, as Jason said, these can be done concurrently. Bring in professionals early. You don't have to continue with them throughout the process, but bring them in at the beginning. When you're first thinking about what you want to do, talk to your CPA or your accountant. Find out what the financial consequences are to you as an owner, to the new entity, to tax situations that may come up. Talk to them, and then talk to your attorneys, and the 3 of you or the 4 of you or the 5 of you get together and do that initial. Then the consultants can go away, and you can continue your exploration with the Northwest Cooperative Development Center or with your own research and exploration with your employees, and figure out what you want to do, come up with a plan, then come back to your professionals and say, this is what we'd like to do, and does it sound feasible? Does it fit with our goals financially as well as structurally? Engage the employees right at the very beginning, especially the ones that you think are going to become eventual owners. So engage your employees right away. Make sure that they have an understanding of what's going to be happening, the timeline, and what's going to be involved. And we'll have quite a bit more discussion about engaging employees.
The other thing about professionals, often business owners have existing relationships with CPAs and attorneys, and it's important to know their comfort level and knowledge, and to identify what, if any, resources they might need to support you in the process. And that's principally why we're here, is to help educate and train those folks to support you so that you have the right resources and people on your team. That relationship might not be insufficient. You might need to reach out to some other people. We also think that we recommend that there are ways of actually starting down the road to employee ownership that do not involve commitment to employee ownership at a structural level. Open book management. There are ways of engaging employees in functional roles across the company. There's lots of practice areas where you can begin to practice democratic governance without actually asking folks to contribute capital right away. So it's a good kind of on-ramp and experimental way of approaching employee ownership.
So part of the process of deciding about conversion and about employee ownership is getting your own books and records together. As business owners, I think we have a few here in the room, you need to gather these documents. Your legal documents, your accounting records, your tax returns, these are things that you're going to need, and we'll explain in a little bit of why you're going to need them. You really need to clean up your personal financial statements. You need to separate your personal financial records from your business records. I can't tell you how many small businesses mingle those two and put them together, and it's a huge no-no. Your accountant will love you when you start separating them. You may find it a headache, and you may need your accountant to help you separate them, but you really should do that. You need to create consistent financial statements for the prior 3 years. So if you haven't been doing financial statements, you're going to have to do a little headache and a little bit of concentration on going, okay, well, I know we had this, and you've got your checking account balance. You can start from there, and you can recreate financial statements from those records, but you need to do that. You need to gather 5 years of tax returns. If you haven't filed your tax returns, that's going to be a problem. Check with your accountant, check with your CPA. And the reason for doing all of this is multifaceted. First of all, you're going to involve your employees eventually, and they're going to look at these records, and they're going to say, do I want to buy into this company? Do I want to become an owner of this company? Is it financially viable? And you can say, oh, yes, we're doing great. And unless you have those records to show them, they may or may not believe you. You're also going to be possibly looking at bank financing or other terms of financing. Those people are definitely going to want to see clean books and records. They're going to want to see that you've kept your loan payments in correct record-keeping formats. For example, many small business owners give loans, quote unquote, to their companies to continue them operating. They never put them in any kind of a record. They don't write it down anywhere. And so the owner comes to sell the business and tells the employees, oh, by the way, I have this outstanding $100,000 loan that the company owes me, and when I sell the company, you have to pay that back. Well, where is it written down? There's no promissory note. There's nothing that shows that the company is liable for that. So those kinds of things all have to be done as you're preparing to talk to people, both your employees, your CPA, your consultants, about this process.
And by the way, this is nearly identical to what an advisor would tell you to go through if you were selling to a financial buyer. This is no less and no more than what would be involved in any sort of other business sale.
So if you're just selling to a third party, you're still going to need to do this.
Yeah. I suspect Wes is going to come up and also tell us that this could help drive up the value in the business too. Poor records, gaps, and inconsistencies will, if nothing else, probably diminish confidence enough that the assessed value, opined value, or just negotiated value is lower than it ought to be.
So other parts of the planning and exploration process includes these issues. say you've got a company with 20 employees and you know 3, 4, 5 of them are interested in ownership, maybe as many as 10 are interested in ownership. You need to identify those key people, that key leadership group. You need to start investing in training those people. Even before conversion, you can go ahead and start democratic governance of of your organization. You can start with training them on what it is to be an owner, what it is to be a manager, what are the responsibilities and the rights of being an owner. Many employees know their jobs really well, and they've been with you for years and years and years, but they don't know what you do as an owner. They don't know what you do in your day-to-day life. And so this is the time to start exploring that and identifying the key people who would be interested. I mean, I personally would not want to be a bookkeeper, but some people might want to be a bookkeeper. You don't know. They might want to know how to read a financial statement. And you're going to need to train employees because eventually you're going to have open books, and those people are going to be able to understand what a financial statement is. You need to consider decentralized decision making. Again, I'll go back to my 20 employee example. Maybe you start splitting things up so that it's not just the owners, or the 1 or 2 or 3 owners making all the decisions, but you have committees, for example, or you have key individuals that you start delegating some of these responsibilities to. Very important to start that process early on. Then the educating and training employees, create working groups. You can create a working group about sales, about finances, about human resources, whatever your industry is in. Maybe start talking about vendor relations. You're going to find that once you start getting the employees involved and having them think more like an owner instead of just a 9-to-5 employee, they're going to start giving you ideas that you're really going to like. Yes?
So can you unpack decentralized decision-making a little more? Just if that could mean holacracy. It can mean a lot of stuff, so I'm just...
Yeah, and decentralized, this can be customized to whatever your organization needs are and whatever the goals of the owners and the employees together. There are many, many different management systems and democratic management systems. The Northwest Cooperative Development Center has a whole section on governance and how different methods will work. So if you want to give some examples other than holistic, go ahead.
I think it depends on the current and planned size of the company. Sociocracy, holacracy, there's a lot of self-management systems that gurus have created complex business models around. But I think the idea here is that decision-making is not the same thing as democratic ownership, and that this can be experimented with, and you can start with decentralized decision-making separate from the entire discussion of employee ownership. And at certain scale, this actually becomes a more optimal way of running the business. For instance, our team is 7 people, and we largely are self-managed. We don't have traditional decision-making within our team. I don't know that we've adopted any sort of labeled scientific sociocracy or holacracy structure, but it works for us because we're nimble and we're small. And I think identifying what sort of system you have or what you want is part of this process, and I think it's part of the planning process for what sort of training needs to be done to nurture the folks who might need training but want to be involved, and understanding where decisions fall within the organization. So I think one step is to do a needs assessment or gap analysis. Another could be to do a decision zone matrix to figure out how things are currently done, and then stack that against what you want to have happen. But there are no fewer than 100 different models out there.
You might, for example, want to do a mentor-mentee system where people that have the experience are paired with people that want to learn that, and then you have them together make decisions that affect that particular area of the business.
What I find is most useful from this is to inventory the decisions that are in fact made within an organization on a day-to-day basis at every level, and understand the level at which those decisions are made, and compare that to the way decisions ought to be made at those levels. Because employee ownership is, again, not about collective decision-making on every issue, and it's important to understand those boundaries. That employee ownership, that ownership vote, happens at a very certain level with boundaries around it. day-to-day decision-making should happen at the operational level. And importantly, you might discover that there's an inadequate level of authority at the most basic level. And this process will show that and could really optimize. A lot of these conversions, a lot of folks are scared because they think that all decision-making is going to flow up to the employee ownership level. Everything will slow down. The reality is that inventorying, assessing, and changing can actually optimize and streamline decision-making within.
Who is in charge of ordering pencils?
Who ought to be? The example I've been giving is one of our associates said, I need a new monitor. Mine's on the fritz. Monitors nowadays are $110. I said, you've got the company credit card. You see the budget. You see the forecast. You see our strategic plan. You have all the financial information you need. Do you need it? Would it help you? It's your decision to make. I don't need to make that. We don't have a policy around that, but it's so relieving for her to know she can make that decision. It's really liberating for me to know I don't have to make it. And informally, we've decided that we have that flexibility.
Okay, so these are some of the desired outcomes of your exploration process and your planning process. You're going to maybe, perhaps, these are just ideas, suggesting a steering committee made up of your key individuals that are going to help you through the whole rest of the planning and structural analysis. They're going to help you with key conversion decisions. What kind of entity do we want to be? Do we want to, what are the qualifications for membership? And if it's a cooperative or other types of ownership, lots of key decision making, and we'll be going over what you're going to need to think about. An agreement on price. An agreement on employee due diligence processes and timelines. Who are we going to train, when, where, and how? All of this comes in the planning and exploration process. Training topics, maybe create an initial board of directors. If you don't like board of directors, stick with a committee. You can stick with a collaborative circle. You can call it whatever you want, but a group of people that are going to help the owners and the employees come together and make really key critical decisions. And then, of course, committees. Committees are always fun, except if you only have 5 people, and then you're always on the same committee all the time with the same group of people. So,
before the presentation, we said, for small groups, less than 7, it may be tempting to think 7 owners, we need a board, we need committees, we're going to subdivide and slice up our 7-member team. That may start to look like form over function, and we generally suggest you don't have to make this more complicated. A 7-member company can have 7 owners, and those same 7 people can be the board. And rather than committees, you might decide, let's just separate roles. 7 of us, you handle this, you handle this. We're each empowered with reporting and accountability to come back and make decisions. But I urge folks to always think about delegated authority so that decisions are being made at functional levels.